Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Literacy Author webinar series. My name is Amanda Cleary, and I'm the Product Marketing Manager for Secondary and Supplemental Literacy. Some of you may have attended Freddy Hiebert's webinar she presented on April 2nd. She's had such an amazing turnout, and we got such good feedback and requests from you that Freddy so graciously agreed to come back for a follow-up webinar on setting and accomplishing goals. However, before we get started, I would like to make a special announcement. You may have noticed a different logo at the top of your screen. That's because we are proud to announce that the K-12 sector of Pearson now became Savvis Learning Company. It's still the same great products you know and love. However, we are now our own separate standalone company. Look for more exciting announcements to come soon. Our goal for this webinar series is to help educators and students alike adapt to the challenges of distance learning. We've assembled a dedicated team of authors and experts to share best practices, strategies, and resources during these unprecedented times. Freddy Hiebert is the president and CEO of Text Project, a nonprofit that provides resources to support higher reading levels. She is also a research associate at the University of California, Santa Cruz. Dr. Hiebert has worked in the field of early reading acquisition for 45 years as a teacher and researcher. Her research addresses how fluency, vocabulary, and knowledge can be fostered through appropriate texts. Additionally, Freddy has brought her extensive knowledge of the ELA teaching and research to several of our new Savvis programs, including MyView, ReadyGen, and My Perspective. But before I turn it over to her, I just have a few quick housekeeping items to mention. Each of you should have a control panel that looks like this. At the end of Freddy's presentation, she will have a chance to answer some of your burning questions. You can type your questions into this question field shown on the screen at any time during her presentation, and she will do her best to answer as many as she can after her presentation. To ensure that you're connected to audio, check the audio section of your attendee panel and ensure you have the computer audio selected and the correct output selected as well. I've put the call-in number in the question field. If you can't connect to audio via your computer, you can call in and enter the access code. So without further ado, Freddy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I want you to know how incredibly impressed I am, how incredibly proud I am that I'm a teacher. As a profession, you've been out there doing things that no other generation of teachers has ever done. You've done it with courage, with humor, and an incredible amount of hard work. And I want to say to you, thank you. I also want you to know that I'm offering this to you as part of my learning process. I decided when the sheltering in place occurred that I was going to learn some new things. And one of those new things that I'm doing is presenting on a topic that typically I don't present on. Usually when you hear me, I'm talking about text complexity, vocabulary, student knowledge. But I think this topic of goal setting is very germane to our role as teachers of reading and writing. The fundamental thing that I'm going to talk about today is establishing the why, sharing the why with our students, and making the why very explicit in the projects that we do as human beings, as not necessarily in our day jobs. And often, I think it's the why of reading. We don't just teach reading so kids can read. We teach reading because we know that what you know influences your comprehension. And we also know that books are the source of information that expands our worlds. And I hope what you get out of this today is some ideas for how you might increase the discussion of the why we read and really looking at what we've learned from reading. I'm going to give you a chance at the end of the seminar to share with me something that I hope I triggered in this conversation. I'm not an expert on goal setting. I've made a practice of it in my own life for very, very many years. And I know that making a small change is the road to making large changes. And I'm going to give you a chance to tell me about what some small changes are. And I'm going to give people I'll give you a URL at the end where you can send those in. And I'm going to give copies of my latest book away, some other books that I've written. And in talking with the organizers of this seminar today, I've been wanting to know how we could have some kind of a party to recognize all of you as teachers. And that's the one thing that we can't do, is have a really big physical party. But one of the things that I'm going to put in the mix today is that I will love to have a 30-minute workshop with some selected people who send in their small changes to talk with you about how we're going to ensure that our kids get back to the page and stay on the page over the summer and also this coming year. Now, I don't anticipate that they're going to be major new insights, but I hope that there's some reminders in what I'm talking about today. Now, a really popular stance with kids and young adults, and I'm not meaning to pick on the author of this book, but it's this idea that in my mind, anything is possible. And I found all these quotes that if I can think it and dream it and imagine it, I can make it happen. It turned out that some of those quotes are actually people who might have used some untoward methods to, like become an Olympic champion. Some of them have been discredited. And they were saying, all you have to do is be able to dream it. Now, dreams, thinking, and imagining is central to who we are as human beings and what we want to promote as teachers. But it turns out that achieving goals, even relatively small ones, isn't just about dreaming it. There's a process. There are steps to take that are really important. Now, why would we really want to engage kids? And I know you've been doing this, but please take me with a grain of salt today. I'm emphasizing some things for the purpose of illustration. And I know that you've been doing many of these things, but why would we want to emphasize goals with kids? Why would we want to uncover the ways in which people are successful in achieving things? And I'm going to say that there's a single answer, and that answer is agency. It's the way in which we feel about the choices we make and what we're capable of. Many of you know about Carol Dweck's 2 mindsets. I personally don't think that that fixed mindset applies to everything in one's life, and a growth mindset and everything else. And we also know that we can support kids in domains where they've had a fixed mindset, especially around tasks like reading, and show them how it isn't just magic or luck that has certain people do certain things. For example, in getting ready for this today, I kept thinking, well, I've never presented on goal setting before. I've done a lot of classes on it. But, if I work hard enough at it, which I have done a lot of over the last 7 weeks, if I practice enough, perhaps there'll be some glimmer of something that will make a difference for some person listening. So it's about making our kids feel like over some things in their life, they have control. Now, I want to emphasize that goal setting isn't a prescription. Often we do things like IEPs. We also have to-do lists, and there's a lot of to-doing when you've set a goal. But often a to-do list isn't necessarily going to move you to, well, it might get you food on the table, which is, I think, an important goal, but it's not going to help you accomplish some of the things that are not necessarily a day-to-day procedure in your life. And they're also not New Year's resolutions. Now, that doesn't mean you can't set a goal at New Year's, but I'm saying the process of setting a goal is a very different one than just saying, I'm going to write a book this year. It's a very different process to say, this is what it takes to write a book. Why am I writing the book? When am I going to do this? And so forth. Now, today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with our goals as teachers. Now, all of us, just to be here, we've had goals and we've been successful with those. We're being successful as teachers of distant learning. But I want to go through the process. When we travel on planes, they tell us to put on our oxygen mask first and then help children. I think to make it explicit for ourselves is an important thing. So let me take a look at some things. I have given a lot of workshops to teachers, and people walk out and say, that was pretty interesting, what Freddy was talking about. I think I'm going to generate some morphological family members from words in Text Project's word pictures. And I'm going to give you the URLs at the end for Text Project, which is an open access website for all of you as teachers. Okay, it's just kind of like saying, I'm going to write a book. that is a really ephemeral goal. And even if I write it down, if I don't have some specific kind of steps, I will forget about it. And in the hassle and bustle of life, it probably isn't going to get done. Now, here's another example. Okay, I'm going to use 4 word pictures, one each week in March. They're going to be at a learning center. Kids are going to make cards, and then we're going to put those cards on a class map. Now, this is more likely to get done for a lot of reasons. I've stated clearly what the what is, the when, how we're going to do it. But when I was looking at this, and these are examples that come from my recent book, the one that I'm going to share with some of you who send me your small changes, I realized, you know what I hadn't included? I don't have the why and the how to here. Why are we doing this? And I suggest that with kids, understanding why something's relevant is incredibly important. Some of the things that we do in school, they don't see the relevance. And then there's also the how-to. Now, for some of you who weren't with us, there's a recording of the session that I gave at the beginning of April on how we can celebrate kids' accomplishments, recognize them and share them. I call that the second how, the how-to. It may actually be that I should have shifted those around, and the how-to is what the actions are. But I like the idea of the how-to being the ways in which we're constantly going to revisit and look at our successes and also look at the challenges. Because one of the things about creating goals is that you got to be ready for things not to go the way you thought they would. And you need to be able to regroup. So what I'm going to do today, so since that webinar that I gave at the beginning of April, I've taken on a project to share with you today. So for the past 6 weeks, I've been working on a really specific project. Now, the what, and I hope you don't mind me sharing, this is part of my, does it impact me as an educator? Yes, but this is really very much part of who I am as a learner and individual. So my goal is to become sufficiently fluent in my native language to pass the official German D2 exam. Yes, I was a native German speaker, but when I was just on the cusp of getting very good with speaking, a teacher told my parents that, in fact, we shouldn't be talking German at home because my oldest brother had some adjustment issues in school. I think that they had nothing to do with language and everything to do with the way he'd been tutored by somebody about how to act in school, but that's a whole nother story. I have a wonderful older brother who's devoted his life to education. So what you also need to know here is that in Germany, there's actually a curriculum of 8 semesters, or could be 8 years, of getting good at German. And as you see here, I've already passed during the time since I talked with you last. Now you can see that on level A2, I only got a C+, but I was so intent on moving forward that I accepted that, although I am going to go back and revisit that. So this is what my goal is. But for the period of time that I'm talking to you about, my goal was to complete the B1 level with at least an 80%. Okay, so I was really specific about the what of the project. But what is even more critical is I have to keep revisiting the whys. Because it turns out, even though I know lots of common German nouns and verbs, German tenses, German articles, because there's gender, Mädchen, das Mädchen, the girl is neutral, and something else is female and something else is male. Everything has a gender, which we don't have in English. It's hard. And there have been times if I hadn't had all of you to report to today, I admit it, I would have stopped. But why else would I want to do this? obviously to share with you, but it turns out I've learned so much about being a learner through this process. And finally, I also want to talk with my cousin in Germany. Okay, so I've been explicit at what the whys are. I made the goal of passing the B2 test by May 20th at 9 p.m. and we're going to find out if I did that or not. And then here I've got the hows. So one how was to do a grammar lesson every day from April 27th. Remember, I finished A2 around the 25th of April to the 19th. And then, because my older sister had a heavier dosage of German at home, she can speak German. So I call her on Sundays and I share with her what I've done and also the calendar where I'm documenting what I've done. So I think you can actually see that I've spent more time on the how-tos because I think sometimes we're so intent on the actions that we forget to stand back and say, how did I do with that action? And to give ourselves a pat on the back. This isn't a gratuitous, a pat on the back for doing anything. I'm very much into and I have been as a teacher, into very visual reminders of what we've accomplished. So for every time I passed a grammar lesson, I gave myself a heart. And every time I did vocabulary practice, I gave myself a star. And then after I talked to my sister, I added a paperclip chain for a week of practice. And today, after this webinar, I'm going to actually show you a project that I'm going to do that's very visual to show me that I was successful, if I was. So we haven't known yet whether I passed that test. So here's an example of a chart that I made. So I've had this very visible in my room, and I finished making the webinar preparation on the 14th, hence I haven't got all the stars and hearts there, but I did them every day. I know this is probably overkill, but here are my paper chain. Every week that I practiced, I've given myself a paper chain that I've been learning German, and it's in a place, I'm looking over there if you can see me on the computer, where I can, it's very visual in my room, and I think it's pretty. Now, the person who hears my talks, now that we're still sheltering in place, and that would be my spouse, he thought I was kind of overdoing it a little bit, but we've had this very pathetic succulent garden in the backyard. And what I've decided to do is to extend it when and if I pass this German test. So here's my whole project. And I actually keep a copy of this where it's visual for me. Why, when, how, and how to. And I want to stress that I keep coming back to the whys. Often the hows are the easiest to do. And I think as teachers, just as human beings, we often forget the how-tos. We often forget to acknowledge what it is that we've done. So this is a cyclical process, right? I started the project after our last webinar when we were talking about celebration, because some brilliant one of you asked in the Q&A, but don't you have to know what your goals are before you start doing this recognizing, sharing, and celebrating? And it's, yeah, that's a really good point. So what I'm saying is there have been these cycles to this project: planning, reflecting, celebrating the completion. And finally now there's the milestone that if in fact I finished it, we can celebrate the whole project. Now I want to talk about moving on with our students. I think that the kind of project that I've designed here is probably not a first step of the way when we're designing with kids. I think a really important thing is to recognize that it takes a lot of scaffolding and modeling. Now, here's a project plan of a 10-year-old, happened to be Michael Phelps, and we know that he went on, although he really worked hard at particular projects, getting to the Olympics, which in fact he was successful at. but didn't take care of some of the other aspects of his life. And he actually really struggled after achieving them. So we need to remember that this needs to be comprehensive. But when you look at this as a child, what he wrote, there's a really clear why. There's a really clear what, really clear when. And he says, I'm going to accomplish these goals by concentrating hard, working hard, and coming to every practice. And it's probably the coming to every practice that really matters. Now, I think in an athletic event such as he was participating in, the how-to may be that he actually had some victories. I'm suggesting that with kids, we probably have to, in classrooms and in distant learning contexts, be a little bit more explicit with that. So everything's the same: the what, the why, the when, the how-to. But I think before we embark on really big projects with kids, we need to establish a foundation. And I think one of the ways to establish a foundation is to have a library of books where we talk with kids about identifying and accomplishing goals. And especially, I love this book, The Book of Mistakes. In all of these books, somebody comes up against challenges. I referred earlier to my brother, the high school teacher, and he said the thing that he saw from 40 years of teaching high school was that those students who took on a project like horseback riding, swimming, running, or whatever, playing the piano, that when things got hard, they kept going. And I think all of these, a library of books that uncovers how real human beings, how fictional human beings, how people have dealt with challenges is a really important part of this. So my first part of goal setting with kids is that we talk about how people identify and accomplish goals. It's not simply dreaming it. It's knowing why we're doing it, knowing what we're doing, and having a plan to actually put that into practice. I think we can also engage students in our small changes. So I took the example that I gave you from my book, Our Vocabulary Goal for March, and I added, so I'm talking about actually taking some of these efforts and posting them, sharing them to say, this is why we're doing this word learning. This is why we're reading this set of books. We want to get really good with these words and our vocabulary will grow. And we're actually going to get some evidence of that. Okay, and the what we've talked about, and here you see in the how, I've actually put in the how-tos. So we have, class claps. So every time we finish the 3 target words, we're going to do our certain kind of class clap. We're going to have a class cheer. We have a class song. And at the end, when we finish the whole unit, we're going to have a new read aloud, and we're also going to have our vocabulary badges. In our last session, we talked about badge making and how that can be some incentive. A third way in which we can engage kids. So I'm saying that before we embark on individual goals and really massively, more well set out goals with kids like the one that I showed you with my German, I think we need to have shared class projects. And I've been thinking of what kinds of things, and I haven't fleshed this one out, but is it possible when we're doing distance learning to create libraries of our student-made books and videos? I don't want to take too much of your time today, but one of the things that I noticed in the virtual tutoring that I'm doing is that the most impactful thing that I shared with my tutee was a video that a child a year older than her made about how she's making books during this time and creating a little library. So is it possible for us to actually engage in a project where our books that we've been making during this time, in the summer, in the fall, so on, or short videos can be curated? You'll notice here that I've done a, travel with reading, creating a giant map of our state and reading our way through it. But I want to really emphasize here that a book description equals a mile, not just that I so and so many words. Remember that we read to learn things, but doesn't mean it's all informational text. We read to learn things about challenges, about how people set goals from narrative text. So that's really critical as well. And finally, we can engage students in individual projects. Why didn't I put the why, how, and so on? But the elements are here. I just haven't labeled them. But here's what I've been doing with my 2T. Why would we want to be doing this? Because sometimes it's really hard to meet with Aunt Freddy every week, or actually we meet a couple times a week. But we're doing this because being a really great first grade reader occurs by reading 2 books a day. Okay, and we're also doing a lot of talking about what it means to be ready to go back as a second grade reader. So I've actually mapped out the how, particular books for my 2T to read. And then there's a rating. Okay, so the child is actually giving herself some credit. And on Fridays, we have a little tea party where she reads her favorite books, and I've sent a box of books, and she gets to pick a new book from that set that's quite different than the books that you see here, which are more instructional in nature. Okay, so I've talked about reading with kids about goals. I've talked about having them share in our goals and keeping us honest about something that we're working toward in our classrooms. I've talked about some group goals, and then there are some individual projects. And you'll notice that whenever I do something like this, I try to make the how-to literacy related, but there are lots of ways in which to do that, right? Last time we talked about physical motions, key words and phrases, sound effects, and I'm going to just play some of them here. I love this one. When I was at the University of Colorado, I actually did one of the Boulder Boulders, and you walk into a stadium and everyone's clapping. And I envision that sometimes when I finish part of a paper that's really hard or part of a book. Okay, and then many of you heard some of my favorite songs. This is something that I hear a lot in my house, and I actually do. And now I probably can't stop the clapping. This might not be a bad idea because I think we all deserve a real clap. And as you heard last time, I'm an incredible fan of badges. Turned out that about 2 days after I finished the webinar on sharing and celebrating, I got my Fitbit badge, the one on the left, for having climbed 20,000 flights of stairs in my career as a Fitbitter. And I also have walked the distance of the Siberian Railroad. So, and yes, I did wear those badges. I'm not today because they didn't go with my outfit. Okay, oops, sorry guys. Now, here's my success. Yes, I actually took the test a little early because I was starting to get so nervous about it, but I got an A+ on it. And I've now started the next cycle of my project, which is to get to the B2 level. So what did we do today? Well, by showing up here, your generosity and being willing to talk to somebody as they're learning about something, I think is really important. For teachers, we teach learning, and at the heart of who we are is we're learners. We also, I identified a goal identification accomplishment cycle, and now it's time for you to share what you've learned. And while you're doing that, I'm going to put, by the way, this is Text Project. It's textproject.org. We've got about 350 free books for, excuse me, I just lost it here. We've got about 350 free books that you can download. And here's the name Text Project. Here's the address, and not only the book, but remember, I'm also going to do I'm going to give more than 3 copies of these books. Last time I sent out a lot. But I'm also, as I said at the beginning, if you're interested in having me give a webinar for your school unit, I'm very happy to do that. And just to celebrate who you've been today, I'm going to play another one of my songs. You guys truly are. I have never in my 50-year career been prouder than I am at this time to be a teacher. Thank you very much.
That was fantastic, Freddie. Thank you so much for that. I'm already thinking about the goals that I want to set now. Hold on just a second so I get the screen back.
I've been tearing up a lot more lately, just thinking about who we are and what we're doing in life. And as I said, I'm just so proud of how we've shown up. We've shown up to be the best possible teachers that there ever have been. So I'm ready.
Totally agree. Totally agree. All right. So I'm having some technical difficulties showing my screen, but that's okay. Thank you so much, Freddie. We're about to take some questions for the next few minutes. If you haven't typed in your questions yet, go ahead and do so now in the questions section of your webinar control panel. We also just wanted to remind everyone that if you want to learn more about the SAVIS literacy programs, including getting free digital demo accounts, you can go to savis.com/literacy. And in addition, we also, for teachers who are using our programs or want to access additional resources to support remote learning, we have free resources available on our website as well, mysavistraining.com/free remote learning resources. And those will be sent out in the email that goes out to you guys tomorrow, which will include your certificate as well. And again, that's in your email that's going out tomorrow. The free remote learning resources page does not require any logins, and you can download and use things immediately. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Paul, and she will facilitate the questions for Freddie.
Great, thank you, Amanda. Thank you so much, Freddie. This was so inspiring, and we already are seeing a ton of great comments from teachers. We have a few questions for sure. So one of the first questions is from Jose. What do you think about emotional feelings when students are learning a foreign language or a new language? Do you think those feelings are important to achieving any learning goals?
I think I need to understand a little bit more about what's meant, like my emotions about how I'm responding as a learner. I mean, I certainly have to say that there have been a lot of emotions for me revisiting my language of origin. An incredible amount of sadness on my part that I was so adamant when we moved to a big city that I wouldn't speak German. I also think that we have to consider, by the way, you know, and you had some stuff on the sheltered English program up on the screen earlier. You know, I'm still very much in the silent phase of production. And one of the reasons I've actually been hurrying through the program that I've been doing is they emphasize the grammar of writing so much that it's time for me to move into another program where I'm actually producing. So I think there are tons of feelings of inadequacy when you learn another language. I think if you're learning about a language that for a variety of social or political reasons you've lost, for me, there's a lot of sadness of the years that I didn't have, you know, talking to grandparents and so on. So I think that there's an incredible amount related to self-confidence, certainly, and not making mistakes. I mean, one of the things I do notice is how much emphasis there is in the program that I use. I mean, I do one little letter wrong and I get the item wrong. You know, really, it wasn't just complete invented spelling, but I thought I did some really good spelling there, you know. So I think that's a really important thing to think about. Thank you.
Wonderful. The next question is from Kathleen. How would you motivate a beginner reader who is struggling to find the why?
Well, that's a question that's in my face right now, because the beginning reader whom I'm tutoring has basically, you know, stated that she would like to go back to preschool where they didn't have to do this kind of thing. So there's an enormous amount of finding topics. So when I said the book box of books that has been sent, you know, what are kinds of things she loves? Fairies and unicorns. So I found just about every you know, easy to read book on, you know, like Uni the Unicorn by Amy Rosenthal, books such as that. So I work hard at finding topics that resonate with her. And I also do an enormous amount of ensuring that she recognizes the difference in her development. I think one of the ways you can do that is actually, you know, here's what we did last week and here's what you did now. I mean, I certainly do a lot of that with my writing, because even though I've written a number of books, I've been writing every day since 1977. Writing isn't the easiest thing for me. So I do a lot of looking at, like, this is what that paper looked like a week ago. This is what it looks like now. So I do a lot of conversation. What can you tell that's different about your reading today? You know, one of the things I'm noticing is this. What are you noticing? But I have to tell you, I haven't nailed it there yet with this little one who matters a great deal to me. So I think it's an ongoing process, and the struggle right now has been intense, right? I mean, in terms of the environment and you know, the kind of help I can give her also virtually. So
That's great, Freddie. And again, we're getting comments here where the teachers are so grateful for you sharing your thoughts and your own experience with goal setting for them. I think it really puts it in perspective and makes it really real for them. We have a question from Odella. What guidance should we consider in helping students not make their goals too big?
great question. Great question. You know, like, I'm going to do fill in the blank. And often when we start out, some of those goals are huge. I mean, as somebody who publishes and continues to, I get a lot of comments from people like, oh yeah, I'm going to write a kid's book, or I'm going to do this. And I think with children, there can be a tendency. I think that cycle that I showed, you know, where the milestones are. So it's like Michael Phelps did an incredibly good job actually of breaking apart those goals. I'm sure that there were lots of people helping him with that. But how about we look at this part of it? I read a bunch of books. I kind of scoured the literature on goal setting for kids, and I have to tell you, there's not a lot of great stuff if somebody wants to write a book on this. But in one of the books that I found, the best one, they actually took down, if you can see me holding this up, they actually had a sheet here that says, like, if my goal is to enter a spelling bee, here are the things that I see are the 3 challenges. Learning more words, managing my stage fright, spelling out loud. Well, it might be that we're going to work on, like, what would it feel like once you've learned 20 words, and then let's revisit it. Okay, so that's one of the things about goal setting, right? is if you're actually doing something that's new, worth doing, you're going to make mistakes and it's going to be challenging. So we also have to talk about, what it's not that you can't do this. Like some people have shared with me that my ambitions and my expectations have been immensely high with regard to German. Well, after all, I knew it when I was a little one, so I should be able to do this. Well, it turns out that German grammar, especially academic language, pretty complex. And so revisiting, and you notice that I had my goals, right, in these steps. And I think that's a really important thing for kids to do. I also think, as I showed, let's take a project. Here's my project. I want you guys to really learn this vocabulary around transportation and around nature and so on. Let's see how we do together. And you guys are keeping me honest, so that you do a lot of modeling. But that's a very good question.
Great. The next question is from Jill. I work with middle school students. How do I help them to find the love of reading when they are not willing to pick up a book and open it?
Well, Jill, I feel your pain. I mean, when we talk, and I hope that next time we visit together, I'm going to be talking with you about what I see as some challenges as we sometimes maybe meet in person or continue distance learning as we move into the fall. I think one of the things that I'm certainly working on is how can we increase our kids' awareness of the interesting things they can learn through text. So I've noticed in my circle of friends how some of them are taking on interesting topics at this point, taking different kinds of classes. Can we start modeling what some kids are doing and what they've been learning as a result of some reading? The other thing I think is to find some series books. I have been not a great fan of, like that every kid is basically what they're doing is wimpy kids, but I find I'm reading series books, or if not a series book, at least, I mean, that's what we do when we binge out on a Netflix or Hulu series, right? We're basically doing a series book. So that's one of the things that I've done with my 2T is I've really found some compelling series books that match with her interests. But I think that one of the things that we start out with is giving illustrations, of what some kids have done and the difference it's made, and then start really looking at, here are some things you could get good at. And why would you want to get good at that? Having those kinds of conversations.
Great. And this
I'm just going to say, that Jill's question, we could continue to have that conversation for a long time. So that's excellent.
Yep. And with regard to that, there have been a couple of teachers, Jamal and Monica, who've asked about what should teacher modeling look like, since you touched upon modeling expectations earlier in the presentation. How should teacher modeling look like for goal setting?
Well, I think that when we do some goals together, we actually, I mean, my guess is that that slide that I showed you of this is my project and you're going to help me on it. We're going to add words to the word wall. There are going to be times when we didn't do it. And I think conversations of, we intended to do this and we didn't. Or one of the things that I realized is that there needed to be a little bit more explicit guidance. Okay, so let's revisit it. So that the notion of reflection, I think, is so critical. mean, I use life as kind of data, and I look at a week and I ask, so what am I really proud of? What really worked, and why did that work? What didn't work? And why didn't something that I really wanted to have happen work? And what could I do to make that work? I think being explicit about that, you know, and I know for myself, you know, uncovering some of these processes that I'm going through can be important. So showing that, you know, it's not just Michael Phelps that had to set goals and then revisit. You know, everybody has to do that. And, you know, giving real life examples, I think, can be important. I don't know, guys. I don't know all the answers here. I'm just throwing some ideas out. These are complex things, and I think it's probably one of the most important things you could learn in life is how to be successful in creating a project. And often we don't really uncover what that is. And I'm just talking about starting to uncover some of that.
That's wonderful. Freddie, I know we still have a couple more questions, but I also wanted to actually take some time to celebrate you and all of the people who are on the phone call who've learned something today. So we got a lot of great comments. They weren't necessarily questions, but they were comments and reactions to what you've shared with them today. So I'm going to just read some of the comments aloud, since we didn't open up the line for everybody to speak, since we have, you know, hundreds of people on. So this is from Danielle. I like how Freddy Hiebert's life, I like how Freddy Hiebert uses life as data. Wow, very reflective. That's modeling there. And this next comment is from Melissa. You made me think about goal setting, about setting goals, but not just setting goals, but how the steps to help accomplish those goals. This next comment is from Jessie. Thank you so much for these insights. I work with teachers who serve English learners and can see so many parallels in setting and revising language goals. I have a lot of ideas from today's session. Thank you, exclamation mark. And this one is from Maria. Greetings from Cuba, a small island in the Caribbean. We do appreciate you, Freddie, exclamation mark. And this next one is from Monica. I'm thinking how I can use goal setting for the remainder of the year with my English 2 special education students. I like the how-to, especially now.
Yeah, I just want to put in here that, you know, my parents were refugees to North America, and often as a kid, you know, I looked at the other kids and I thought I wasn't as lucky, even though I know now in retrospect I was so much luckier for the incredibly rich family background I had. But it always seemed like magic that certain kids knew some things and I didn't. And I just didn't know how they'd gotten to know those things. And one of the things with agency is to recognize how much of who we are is learned. I think that's really, really important. And thank you, Pa. Like I said, I still want to have a big party online. I just don't know how to pull it off. So if somebody has some ideas that we can actually say, look at what we've done, and maybe there's some venue, maybe you can send me stuff at Text Project and we can start saying, look, we did this. So thank you so much, Pa, for giving me this opportunity. For those of you who came and listened, Amanda, for structuring this, I really, really appreciate it. And I'm going to answer one last question. You know what that question is? How many felt tip markers did it take you to get your hair that color, Freddie? That's supposed to be a joke. If some of you have asked,
lovely. It looks lovely, Freddie.
If you've heard me in person, you know that I have a very strange sense of humor. So I thought that was the first question somebody was going to ask. So what exactly have you been doing? It's felt tip markers. Yeah, I've pretty much gotten all of them out of Amazon.
Well, you're definitely being celebrated, Freddie. We all appreciate you, your expertise, your insight, all the research you've done to help support our teachers. And for all of those who attended today, thank you for joining us this afternoon, evening, wherever you are. We will be sending a recording of the webinar as well as Freddy's slides out tomorrow or into the next week. It's a 3-day weekend here in the US for those of you who aren't here. And so they will be made available next week. We also will be sending folks who attended today a professional development certificate, and that will be coming tomorrow around this time. So just be aware of that. It will come through your email. Thank you again, everyone, for attending. We appreciate it. Freddie, did you have any last words you wanted to share?
Just remind you that this presentation will be up at Text Project, and it's small changes at textproject.org. Send me your small change, okay? And with a snail mail, because I can't send you a book virtually. I mean, I could send you an ebook, but I want to send you a real book and a note. So thanks again, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Please have a great evening.